Hi everyone, to Lee from China EVs and more. Lei and I are always kicking around ideas for new ways to inform you, our audience, about all that's happening around the world in the EV, battery, chip, connected AV, and mobility sectors. When I approached Lei about launching this podcast a couple of years ago, I anticipated that what happens in China in these sectors would have huge implications globally. That's precisely the case, especially in Europe and the United States, the two other largest automotive markets in the world. Despite all the drama of 2022, China was still able to lead the world in new energy vehicle sales at around 6.5 million units. That's almost 100% year over year growth from 2021. What's more, China exported over 3.2 million vehicles in 2022, growing 57% from the year before. In addition, between January and April of 2023, exports surged another 76% to almost 1.5 million vehicles, with many of those landing in the EU and UK. That number will keep growing, with a larger percentage over time being new energy vehicles. That's why it's so important to learn and know more about these companies, executives, brands, products, features, and services that are already hitting your shores. Whether you're a consumer, analyst, consultant, anchor, but especially if you're a legacy OEM or a tier one, I'm confident that there isn't anyone else out there that can provide you with the type of detailed, up to date, and accurate coverage, insights, and opinions that Lei and I do. Most of these so called China experts haven't been to China in years, so make sure you check their receipts. China EVs and more is the one and only. When that's not good enough, we use these Max episodes to supplement our knowledge and expertise with others in the space, again with the goal of making you better informed. I'm very pleased to introduce our latest Max episode, where we bring you conversations we've had with special guests from the EV, AV, chip, battery, and mobility sectors. As we head into the second half of 2023, BYD and Tesla still dominate the China market, while companies like NIO and XPeng are showing signs of turning a corner. New brands and products still seem to be introduced each week, while the intense price war shows no sign of stopping. Despite these domestic challenges, China EV Inc. wants to have its formal coming out party this week during IAA Munich. How will they be received? How have those companies that have already entered the market been doing? Can they be successful long term in the EU? Which brands have the best chance to succeed? For all these questions and much, much more, we turn to Philipp Sayler von Amende, co-founder and CEO of carwow Germany. For those wondering, carwow is Europe's largest new car marketplace and boasts the largest automotive channel on YouTube with over 1 billion downloads. It's a trusted source for buyers to research, compare, and ultimately connect and transact with sellers of new and used vehicles. In our last episode, we interviewed James Hind, the recently ex-founder and CEO of carwow, which was founded in the UK. His podcast was so well received, we thought it would be a great idea to have Philipp kick us some knowledge about the German market. We hope you enjoy our conversation with Philipp. Hi, Philipp. Thank you for joining us. It's very apropos on the eve of IAA Munich 2023. We were able to have a great discussion with James about the UK market and how that's evolving with increased EV adoption. But you're living, working, and I argue are a huge catalyst and source of information for Germany and their increased interest in EVs, and in particular Chinese EVs. So we're going to talk all about that in the next hour or so. But first, can you give us a little bit about your background? You know, how you started in the space and what you've done in the past, and how you got to this point to work at carwow.
Sure. Well, thank you very much to and Lei for having me here today. A bit of my background. I'm actually a real car child, I would say. I grew up in a car dealership. My parents are car dealers. They have 3 dealerships, and I started working there pretty much as a child. Back then, it was a Renault dealership and a Chrysler workshop, and it evolved into
Chrysler.
Yeah, Chrysler back in the days. It evolved into nowadays is Peugeot, Volvo, Mazda, and they're also looking at adding a Chinese brand. But that's really where I started my career. Realized I can't work with my dad though. I think we had some cultural clash, and that's why I went. Actually, I went abroad. I was living in the States when I was 16 for a year. And that for me started my international career, but I could never leave cars. I was starting my career with Porsche as an intern back in 2001, I think. And then I spent all my life somewhere within the car industry. Started in management consulting after my MBA, which I gained from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. So I studied in Asia. As a consultant, I was consulting all the German manufacturers on marketing and sales strategies. I then did something very different. I went to the World Economic Forum and leading their automotive program, so to say. And I met Scott Painter there, the founder of TrueCar in the States, actually. And that is how I actually found a solution to all the problems I always heard from my friends. Hey, I'm getting a new car. Well, they all want to rip me apart, right? What's the right price to pay? And I saw Scott had a solution for that in the States. And for about 2 years, we discussed that this is an international problem. How do we bring this to Europe? How do we take this to China? Even we discussed back in the days. And so I ended up 2014 to join TrueCar to build their European business, which we never built, by the way. But that is pretty much how I got involved in the online ecosystem, where I learned a lot. And I actually met James Hind back in those days when they were 8 people building carwow. And I was like, listen, this is amazing what they have been doing in the UK. I followed them. And after we didn't go international with TrueCar, I built their OEM and advertising business. But then I left because the family was still here. I was going back and forth between Munich and LA. And I was about to found a carwow equivalent in Germany when James approached me and said, listen, we now have another fundraising round. We got the money in the bank. Why don't you join us and lead Germany? And I think I said no twice before I then said, it actually looks interesting. Why don't we meet and talk a little bit more in detail? And I met him and his co-founding team. I was really impressed by the technology, really impressed by what they built. And I realized that I could just run so much faster working together rather than building that all from scratch. And that is how I ended up end of 2015 to say I'm joining carwow and I'm building up their international business. We then initially launched beginning of 2016. With Germany as the first market, 2 years later, with Spain as the next market. And it was a crazy ride from, really first international employee to building a company in another market, building it to the absolute market leader now in new cars in Germany, the market leader in new cars in Spain. And that's pretty much how I ended up at carwow.
Now, how many employees are there in Germany right now?
So pure employees in Germany is around 65, but it's difficult to say because we run product and marketing and a lot of functions out of London. So we have tech centralized with marketing centralized. So the people on the ground in the markets are normally the commercial teams. So all the teams that work, the dealers that work with manufacturers, and some interface functions, so some local marketing functions. So we have like purely dedicated market functions, and we have then in London also people working for the different markets.
Okay.
So Philip, the key word I got out of your introduction was technology. So what is the secret sauce when it comes to carwow technology? What makes it tick or click?
Honestly, I could tell you this, it's all of the amazing technology. In the end, like any startup, the idea is one thing. It is how you bring it all together. How do you bring a good tech team that is fast, that is flexible, that is adapting, together with the right commercial people to make it happen in the market, right? And I think what I found is, when I saw carwow, is that they were incredibly fast in building new things. We launched Germany 3 months after we incorporated the business, which is unprecedented for a tech company. Like they normally build for a year before they go live. But we pretty much had this attitude on build an MVP, go out, fail again. We launched a configurator without a color. I said, well, you can't sell cars that way. We sold cars that way. And then we added color. And guess what? We added options. And options, one of the most important things for a German consumer. it is just a matter of what is your expectation. Yes, you cannot be a market leader without that function, but you can start quickly, learn, and then adapt to the market. And I think that has been our secret sauce. We have a good global flow, so to say, but we then also learn from the markets. What elements do you need to localize and what elements do you also put a compromise on, because it works better across all European markets?
I didn't know there was a Germany speed. There's a China speed, but there's also Germany speed. Okay.
We're going to circle back to that. But hey, Philip, can you give us a brief history on how Germans historically have shopped for cars and how that's changed or evolving because of carwow, because of the digitalization and e-commerce and things like that in Europe?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I have to be really careful not to annoy my German fellows because I'm not the typical German, right? The reason I'm not working at the car dealerships of my parents is exactly that I don't like the German conservative traditional culture, but I'm more on like the American positive and fast moving, failing element. But I would describe the traditional German car shopper. Well, they go to their VW dealer and they buy their fifth, sixth, seventh, eighth Volkswagen Golf, right? You go to your dealer, you look at the car, you drive it, you buy it there. That was the traditional model. I think, like we're going back, like online is not that new. I mean, the market, the classic, the original classified started 20 years ago in the 90s already. Before that, like 30 years ago, when Auto Trader started in the US, like in Germany, the equivalent Mobility E and Auto Scout started. So this is not a new thing. So people got used to research online. And I think that is something that has happened 10, 15 years ago for, like anything. People go online more and more and more. And I think ever since we founded carwow, there's not that big of a difference. I always start at like when we launched, it's already 85, 90% of people started their research online. That is something that is common nowadays already. What is still not common is...
Well, let me stop right there. Is there a line of demarcation from an age standpoint, or is it just kind of across the board? Germans have started shopping online, or at least researching online.
I think we haven't seen a real difference on the researching side. It is really across the board. And I look at the typical carwow car buyer. There's no difference. I mean, a new car buyer is mid-50s and male. And that is the same on carwow. I was actually shocked in year one when, I still talk to a lot of customers directly to get feedback when, in that launch phase. And you were talking to a 72-year-old man who was like, this is going to be my last car that I'm buying, but I really want this Skoda. And I was surprised because I was expecting the 35-year-old. But no, it is absolutely across the board. Research moved online. And what I would say in Germany is still less than in other markets is buying online for a good like a car is not common at all. And we see that all the time. I think, again, back to the secret sauce you asked, Lay, I think the secret sauce of carwow is that we didn't expect people to go straight online and buy, but that we connect the online on the offline world. So we bring consumers online together, the dealers, we make it way easier for consumers to shop and experience prices and get offers, everything automated, fully automated, while it feels not automated. And for a dealer to get access to that online shopper, but then convert them in their dealership. Pre-COVID, 99% would go to the dealership and buy there. Now, post-COVID, I would say there's probably still 80% go and do the deal at the dealership, but they open up way more and say, can you send me a contract on WhatsApp or email or whatsoever? There was huge hesitation before COVID. That changed quite a bit, but it's still the majority will visit a showroom at some point of the buying journey. And mostly it is to sign the contract.
Well, the 70-year-old is the new 35-year-old.
All right.
Great point, because I think everywhere in the world nowadays consumers have gotten a lot more knowledge about cars and EVs. I think they have that understanding more than before. So I think that's playing into...
To your point, Lay, there was definitely arbitrage on the dealer side, on the seller side before, but your platform really, really kind of equalizes that and creates this opportunity for the consumer to come in being very informed, right? So I think that's amazing. I think that's the best part of it. And I'm a little bit surprised because stereotypically, the thought is that Europeans and Americans, the younger Europeans and Americans might be more open to research and doing a bit of shopping online, but the older generation are not. So you're actually saying, you know what, be it 35 or 70, they're very open. So, I think that's kind of smashing a stereotype, or at least for Germany. So
I always try to find that clue because we had that at TrueCar, right? You were very interesting for the younger shopper, for the younger generation. I never found it every time I tried, and it's the same for UK and Germany and Spain. We saw that actually we track pretty much the same shopper that you have offline. It's a typical new car shopper. There's few differences. We over-index on premium. We over-index on EVs for the fact that people that are online normally they also have a higher disposable income and they are more technology open, right? So yes, there is that bit, but in terms of age, we've never found age, or even when we look at male or female mix, we never saw any difference from the traditional shopper.
So, basic question: how does carwow work in Germany? James had kind of gone through the process of how it generates revenue, but can you tell us, in case the folks that are listening right now didn't listen to James' podcast, number one, number two, and can you tell us if there's any differences between the German business and the UK business?
Yeah, I mean, to the first question, we have pretty much our traditional business is our new car marketplace. So users shopping for cars, either they know what they want, they come in, they configure a vehicle in order to get offers that they can compare, and they get transparency on pricing. So what you said before, we take this entire arbitrage out. And at the moment where you as a user, you have received all those offers, you've compared those offers, at the moment you're contacting a dealer or a manufacturer, because we now have more and more in Europe, we have more and more manufacturers selling directly. At that moment, we are pretty much creating a lead to our partner, and that is what we monetize. So they pay us for that customer contacting them on a specific offer. That is the core business store on new cars. And then on top of that, what we have built and what I've built internationally for 3 countries is our car manufacturer and advertising business, where we started not putting bling bling ads on, right, but putting natively integrated a retail media solution. So when you're shopping for a certain car, we can give you a very targeted ad from a competitor and say, hey, have you also considered a Polestar when you're looking at a Tesla, right? And it doesn't feel like an ad because it is integrated into your journey, and you then also cross-shopping to that vehicle, and we give you an opportunity to position your vehicle there. And that business has grown significantly and has become a huge growth and profitability driver for us. So that is the second big business that pretty much generates revenues for us. And that is it for Germany, I would say. In the UK, we are further ahead because we have 2 years ago acquired a company and started this Sell My Car, or like the reverse auction, so to say, where users can sell their car to dealers, and we auction it out to dealers, where we, again, do pretty much the same thing, but the other way around, where we say a user can sell their car online to a dealer. And we also launched used cars. And we absolutely have the same vision in Germany to launch that in future. But for the moment, it's just a matter of maturity, right? We're further ahead in the UK. We're proving our unit economics in the UK. And whenever we have proven that, we take it to our global markets and roll it out there.
Let's move away from carwow a little bit and talk on the ground in Germany. And what is this current sentiment? Because recently there was this Economist article that Tu and I just shared, and the title was, "What if Germany stopped making cars?" So I'm asking...
Very provocative. I'll send it to you, Philip, if you don't have it yet. I'll send it to you. To you.
So I'm wondering, tell us the buzz on the ground, especially leading up to IA Mobility Munich. Many Chinese China EV Inc. is exhibiting. On the ground, is it this sentiment? Is it one of worry? Like, tell us.
Well, hold on, because I'm going to add on this, Philip. So see if you can remember my question and then answer Lei's, because I want to understand, when did the trend of EVs begin? Was it just 18 months ago? Was it 5 years ago? And how has, and this rolls into Lei's question, the sentiment now that a dozen, 15, 16 Chinese EV brands have entered Germany?
It's a very, very good, a very broad question. Oh my God, I don't know where to start. Let me go a little bit back, right? I did, for me, and I'm not representative, right? I did, for the very first time as a consultant in 2008, work with BMW on their crazy Project I, right, which became BMW I, and they were actually leading. They were one of the first ones seeing, besides Tesla, we need an EV. And then they completely gave it up a few years later. Oh, it's too expensive.
That's a discussion topic for another time, because they were, like you said, they were so leading.
But they saw this early, and it was too early for the market because the market was just not there, and EVs were not a thing, I would say, until probably 2019. That's when we discussed it internally. We said 2019 at carwow, we said we got to be leading in EVs. We got to be the first ones. People told us we're crazy. They're like, it's not a market. It's so small. It's only Tesla. Every German manufacturer would have still told you Tesla will go away. They'll fail. And I was horrified in all my roles before. Whenever you talk to anyone at the board level on Tesla, they're like, they'll go away. And that was the mantra, right? They're not big enough. It's that thing from Silicon Valley that will go away. And nobody really took electric serious until I would say until just before COVID, when everybody was like, oh shit, we need to do something about the environment. It looks like Tesla is getting successful, so maybe we should do more of that. And then VW put that huge effort behind on we need the ID, ID3, we need the ID series. And that's when pretty much the government started pumping money into it as well. So that was, I think it was end of 2019, beginning of 2020, when they launched their first government incentive. And they launched it just before COVID, and you could get around 6,500 euros when you bought an EV from the government. It was a combination of government and the industry had to pay some of it as well. And then COVID hit everyone, and everybody was afraid, the car industry is going to die because nobody's going to buy cars anymore. And the government pumped more money into it. They doubled their share on the incentive. So you could get up to 9,750 euros on an EV. That's nearly 10,000. That's $10,000, right? That's nearly 10,000 euros on an electric vehicle. And I think that I was back then saying that's crazy. That's not needed. Why do you throw more money at that problem? It's not the problem that you don't give enough money. It's a problem that at the moment dealerships are closed, and then there was a chip problem. But that meant that pretty much the second half of 21 and 2022, EV sales were flying. And you didn't see it in the numbers because it was orders were flying. But the actual deliveries, like we're still living first half this year, we're still living off the dream from last year because it's cars that get delivered that were ordered last year. And we had at carwow, we over-index on EVs. I told you that before. But last year, we had moments where a share of configurations of 58% EVs. That was last year's summer. And everybody was like, I need to order my EV now, so I get it by the end of the year, so I get the big government grant because it's going to be reduced 1st of Jan 2023. It went from 9,500 to 6,750. And that is for under 40,000 euros list price. There's a tiering. Beyond that, you get less. And as the government is phasing out the incentives, people always go crazy, I need to order it now, so I get the higher incentive. But that incentive has pushed EVs big time. But you saw the sales numbers always lagging. And that is where then the biggest problem at the beginning was there were no EVs available. I mean, you had one car per segment, right? You could get an ID3 or a Hyundai Kona. And then you were like, and what else, right? There was no more options. While on combustion engines, you have 40, 50 models in each segment. And you were very limited in what you could get. I bought an EV myself last year, and I was like, oh my God, you don't have the choice that you have on combustion engines. You go to BMW, the choice is outrageous. It's huge on every single segment. And on the EV, you then have, I can get the i3 that's pretty old. I can get now an i4 or an iX. And that was it. You had 3 models. And you're like, wow. And then they're not. And then you start comparing. You're like, actually, the battery management system of some American player is much better. And then, and the range is better. And by the way, you also get a charging network of it. Why should I go for BMW, right? And I think that happened a lot. And then the ID3 actually had a really, really good start. I think it really sold well. And then they ran into chip problems. You had a year and a half delivery times. And I think that is where the first China EV, which is only half a China EV company, in my opinion, MG, started to come the really attractive pricing. And they had that one promise: the car's available. You can actually get one, right? And that's where people started really switching and go into MGs. Tesla, hugely successful. Polestar really started growing during that time. But it was really...
Let me stop you right there, Philip. for our listeners who do not know this, SAIC or Shanghai Auto owns MG, which is a British brand, and that's what Philip is talking about. So sorry
Thank
about
you for
that, Philip.
stopping
I
me.
just wanted to briefly explain.
Yeah.
So please continue.
No, I think that, but that is very true, right? There is the China EV companies that are Chinese, and then there is the ones that actually use a European brand like MG or Polestar that are owned, or Lotus now as a new one, that are owned by Chinese and are manufactured in China, but they are not perceived, and they don't want to be perceived either as a Chinese brand in Europe. Also, I think it's part of their success because they use pretty much their European heritage and their name as well to not be directly associated.
Well, let me stop you there, Philip. How many consumers know? Like, is it? Do you?
They do know.
Is there a thing on carwow from an information standpoint that says manufactured in Wuhan or anything like that?
Well, consumers do know that they are manufactured in China, but they also know that the Dacia Spring is manufactured in China, and BMW manufactures cars all over the world, right? But there is still this, and I think it is not, it's an invisible fact that, oh, it's a brand you've heard before, it's been around for decades, even though, yes, it went bankrupt and was sold somewhere else. But there is this association on, you've heard this brand many times in your life, versus my biggest, the thing that makes me laugh all the time. I'm really sorry for all the Chinese and for yourself. I had a new head of marketing start last week. She was in a meeting and somebody was saying BYD, and she's like, "What is BYD?" "Oh, it's build your dreams." And she was laughing out loud. You're kidding me? Like, no, it's build your dreams. It's a Chinese brand. And she did not believe I was like true about it. And then you tell her that the Atra 3 is an okay name, but you say, "Oh yeah, there's a dolphin and a seal," and like Germans go like, "This is a joke. You're kidding me. There's a funky cat? Really? That's a car?" And so they really don't believe that because they're so serious. Like in Germany, they love numbers. Like, it's the A6, the A3, it's the 3 Series, the 5 Series. They're used to very engineering-driven terms, and suddenly somebody comes with really funky names, and they don't believe you in the first instance. And it's so unknown to them, that concept of having funny names or like other names around, that they're really struggling with that, to believe it's true. While, you come to the Polestar 2, 3, 4, it's more of a concept, or an MG4, which is like, yeah, it is the used terminology. It's something you're used to, something that you've known for decades. You've bought cars for decades. I think also big difference, a European or American car buyer versus Chinese car buyer is it's not your first purchase, your second purchase, or third, but you have bought cars your entire life. And you have some habits and some knowledge in the background that, yeah, it's just different for them. But coming back, Lei, did I answer your question, actually?
Yeah, no, you haven't answered my question. The statistics you sent us, right? I mean, the half Chinese brands are doing well. The MGs, the Polestars. And the true Chinese brands, I'm like, this is like crying wolf, right? Or crying Chinese EV Inc. The volume's not there yet, but the threat is there because we know all of these companies, the CEOs, the board, they visited China back in April, right? And what has transpired with the Volkswagen X-Bomb? I mean, I said that was a super blockbuster event of the century. For something to happen like that. So I'm asking you on the ground, what's the buzz?
Well, let me ask you this. So fast forward now to late 22, early 23, because you said that the MG was available, so people bought it. But now more electric vehicles are available from European brands. Do you think so from your data, is it pricing? Is it features? What's making the MG now still be the bestseller by far?
Yep.
And then some of these Chinese brands starting to gain some traction. So
I think it's a very simple answer. It's price. It's pricing and technology. We have asked, actually, let me maybe state some facts, because we did a very first survey last year in December, and we repeated it in May this year, because I was also like, you mentioned Auto Shanghai and this event, right? How this really influenced. When I ask in January, when I ask execs at big German manufacturers about Chinese brands, are like laughing. They're like, "It's not a threat. Come on. They won't ever, in Germany, Germans will buy German brands. They won't live up to the quality, etc. Very different answer you get nowadays. But so we did a survey to our users on the platform. So anyone that was researching cars, we asked a few questions, and we were asking them if they would consider a Chinese car brand for their next car purchase while they are in the research process. And in December 2022, 30% said, yes, I can imagine buying a Chinese brand. In May 2023, 42% said they can imagine buying a Chinese brand. And I bet you
Did that surprise you? Did these numbers surprise you?
They just surprised me because there was not many brands available. I mean, in all honesty, you had again, MG and Polestar are not seen as Chinese brands. I think the real proof comes if NIO, BYD, Great Wall, brands I haven't heard of before and that are truly Chinese. And the increase surprised me as well. You go within half a year, you go from 30 to 42%. I bet you I do this end of year when there is more buzz around it after IAA and after, more Chinese brands available and on the road. And that's one very important fact. The cars need to be on the road. They need to be seen.
Yep.
Then you'll be at...
That's the best marketing right there.
Then you'll be above 50%. And so that was actually a surprising moment for us all that, even though there's very little availability and very little seen so far, is already that many people would consider it as a next purchase. But then even more interesting, what do they associate with Chinese brands? And I give you the top three. The top three is better offers, better rebates, more value for money, and a better choice or selection of EV range models. So it is exactly what they do, right? The big problem they've done, except MG came in and they got it so right, in my opinion. They came in, they sell the MG4 starts at 30,000 euros, while the ID3 and all the competitors are at like 40,000 euros plus. BYD came in selling the Atto 3 for 44,000 euros. Great Wall came in selling the Aura Funky Cat for 41,000 euros list price. I'm like, that's a joke. Like, why would you think you can charge a premium for a brand where everybody associates them with great technology, but it needs to be cheaper? It needs to be value for money. Nobody buys an ID3 because it's cheap. It's a premium still. It only works because you have a 10K government grant on it, so you bring it down to a competitive price to an ICE vehicle. But if they would still buy a German car if it's the same price, they will not opt for another car. And I think we've learned this. If the Japanese have learned this, the Koreans have learned this. Why is Kia and Hyundai so successful? The first 10 years, they came in purely through price. And over time, they've worked themselves up. But what the Chinese at the moment are trying is, we come into this premium market as premium and see where it goes. It goes nowhere. It really goes nowhere. The only numbers they're now hitting is, and if you look at the numbers I shared, it's like appalling. It's ridiculous. You don't even see them. And if you look into the details of those numbers, 80% of them are fleet. So it's actually rental car company cars. So there's actually, in terms of pure retail, it's really single-digit numbers what they're selling at the moment. And the problem, in my opinion, is pricing.
But you know what the weird thing is, Philip, is that if you look at BYD in Southeast Asia and some of these Chinese EV brands, they're really, the pricing there is really competitive.
Yeah.
And these brands have become, the Atto 3 is the number one vehicle in Israel, in Thailand. So it's mind-boggling. It's a bit of a head scratcher that BYD would price it so, let's say, uncompetitively relative to the other markets that they sell it in. And so if they do reduce the price, I think it'll sell like crazy in Germany, because to your point, there's a little bit of nationalism, but it's not going to trump price.
No.
So,
and that's what it's the number one thing is pricing. If you have a great price with a good technology and a good car, which the Atto 3 is, right? And if you cannot compete Volkswagen, absolutely, you'll sell that car. But you cannot come in expecting people to buy a Chinese brand, a brand they've never heard before, at the same price as Volkswagen, where they have heaps of trust in that company. And even if the technology, the software, or the entertainment, in-car entertainment is not as good, they don't value that as much anyways, by the way.
Yes,
that is another thing. And so they only can compete if they come in with competitive pricing. They need to be better value for money. They started doing that now on leasing. They suddenly went from like the 400 euros per month to 199 on the Atto 3, which the MG4 is also 199. And that makes it competitive, right? Because that takes it down from like the 40K to the 30K segment. So you suddenly get the Atto 3 for the same price as an MG4, while the list price is 10K difference. but they need to get that list price down as well, because guess what? Germans still love to buy and own cars.
Sure.
It's still it's only the leasing share is only around 25% in the market, and 75% still get bought or financed because people still have this concept of ownership. It's moving, leasing is growing fast, but you need to be seen as a very competitive on the list price as well.
So in the United States, leasing has grown because the average vehicle price has increased and it's become less affordable to own.
Yeah.
And so that's why leasing, I don't know if it's the same situation in
it's
Germany.
Absolutely same here.
The one thing that I will point out, and you know this, is that whereas the traditional legacy automakers, the last thing that they want to do is cut pricing on a product. These China EV Inc. is the Tesla model, where I'll price it and I'll test it and I'll price it. And with Tesla, it's really only been down because they don't have new products. But this is where I think a BYD is really going to take back that data. Probably they're going to start working with you if they're not already, and they're going to have these insights. And guess what? They react very quickly, and you know this.
I think that is a big advantage of the Chinese. They're more flexible. They're China speed, and you see it. As I said, on leasing, you already see it. I'm 100% certain they have those conversations as we have them at the moment and say, oh, we need to adjust pricing. We've seen it. NIO did it right away on the ET5 when they launched. They changed it immediately to also be available for the bigger Grand. And they are much faster. They also, NIO launched the subscription only. And Germans said, I don't want subscription. 2 weeks later, it was available for sale. So you see that. And I can't wait for that change because that will help them to accelerate. But at the moment, I was surprised they all came with this attitude on everybody knows us. So the first time I talked to all of them, I was like, we don't need marketing. Everybody knows us. We are like a huge player. We are the biggest EV player in the world. Why would I do marketing? And we come at a premium. I was like, these are two things you really got to change if you want to be successful and if you want to do volumes.
Right. So here's an interesting one. The Inflation Reduction Act for the United States has been in place. I know you talked about the German government having some subsidies, but the Inflation Reduction Act is much more comprehensive. We're talking about giving or helping fund battery cell manufacturing investment. And so because most people don't know that Volkswagen Group is highly reliant on the China market to be successful. And they've been extremely successful over the last several years, with the exception of, let's say, post-COVID, post-2020, where the ICE sales have fallen off significantly in China, while ID sales have not gained any traction. Recently, the ID3 was reduced in price by another 16%. And so now they're starting to see a bit of traction. But with Chinese exports increasing into Europe significantly, and a good portion of those being MG and EVs, do you think that Germany and the EU broadly will try to create something more comprehensive to protect the domestic market? Because the crazy thing is, and you probably heard this, Volkswagen is going to start importing into Europe from China.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts and what's your best guess?
Yeah, now you go really political.
Do you not want me to talk about that?
No, absolutely. I'm fine. No.
We can avoid it. Okay.
No, 100% fine. I think it's a very, very difficult one, right? I think there is the EU, and then there is individual countries. I think the EU, and there's members of the EU like France, and Carlos Tavares has been very outspoken about this. We need protectionism, like the Chinese going to kill us. Yes, if you own Stellantis, you are exactly that, because that's your biggest threat at the moment. But then let me talk to you about Germany. A German-Chinese relations, very different. Walk through any manufacturing plant in China and look at what machines they have there. I mean, the German economy has been has benefited so much from China over the last 2 decades.
Everyone has.
It's not only Volkswagen, right? It's all our SMEs that exported all the machines and built. I mean, I was walking through one of the car plants of Chery when I was there in Wuhu, and I was you go through, there's robots, there's machines, all of half of them are German brands, and I'm like, how can Germany stop that? Right, the moment they would start protectionism, China would do it, and then you end up in a war which really doesn't benefit anyone. So I think especially Germany has a huge interest not to put protectionism in, because they're also benefiting hugely from the relationships in China, if it's exporting their own technologies or their own machines, to also producing EVs in China, because they can produce them cheaper there and then import them back in. So, and I think that is a struggle we always have in Europe, that you have different interests, and it's not one market. It's not like the US where it's one government, but it is all the member states together, and there's very different interests. So it is. I don't have a clear answer. The EU probably wants to push more for it, but Germany is going to push against it, and that's why I think we also, as Germans, we're stuck because we're so dependent on China that we cannot limit it either. I think it's a give and take, and I personally don't think protectionism is great. What I can say, though, is, like you have in the US this huge inflation react, and you have a lot of investments. We have that too, but it's not done by the EU. It's done by the countries. Like, we have huge government grants on EVs. We have huge grants at the moment on exchanging all your heating and house heating, etc., to get away from the unsustainable stuff. We have huge subsidies in all areas already, but we don't have like this one big program that we advertise outside.
Sure.
It is more like there's so many things going on and so many investments into like climate neutrality and CO2 reduction, and it's on all different fronts. We are, though, on the EV side, we are phasing out, right? We're phasing out. We phase out this year. They're going to phase out more next year. And they are, that is one thing I'm really worried about EVs at the moment, because they're not priced competitively. If they now take more and more government grants away, or they at some point take them completely away, they won't sell. Because in the end, we are also in a very difficult economical situation where people can't afford, and they won't ever, again, we come back to pricing. People won't ever pay 5K or 10K more for a car because it's like climate friendly. They can't afford it. You opt for like your best option, and the grants in place. There's a good alternative, but we also saw that interest I've been talking about last year, above the 50s. It heavily declined first half of this year. It heavily declined. We'd back down at like 35%. That is the market. You see that in sales numbers as well. EV sales are down. 1st of September. So what is that? 3 more weeks. They'll phase out all the grants for companies. Companies can't get the grant anymore. It's only on retail anymore. And companies make up 50% or up to 2/3 of car sales in Germany. So if you can put it on your company, then it's only down to retail market, which is 1/3 of the market. So, and they're reducing everywhere. And I think that is a risk if the car industry can't offer cheaper prices because production costs are too high. And
Right.
But that's the opportunity for China Inc. In my opinion, that's the opportunity. If they get their prices right, that's where they will win. And that is where I would be so afraid as a German manufacturer at the moment.
That's perspective, right? You say that's the opportunity for China EV Inc., but that's the threat for European Legacy Inc.
Yeah.
And we're clearly seeing that the Inflation Reduction Act, it didn't eliminate that threat from the United States, but it kicked it down the road by a few years for sure. And so you got the opportunity to come to Shanghai in April. We met, we talked, we had a ton of fun. Didn't get to party together, so I was disappointed in
that in Munich.
We'll try to remedy that in Munich. Initial thoughts when you hit the ground, you saw these green plates, you got into the Shanghai Auto Show, and then you saw all this foot traffic, all these amazing cars. You saw all the German executives with their white shirt and their blazer walking around like, jaws open, generally speaking, right? I don't want to exaggerate that, but is that what you saw? And what was your experience, and kind of what were you thinking about when you got to come to Shanghai for the auto show?
It's extremely exciting. I mean, I hadn't been back to China or Shanghai in 10 years. So it was quite a long time. I was not there, right? I was there.
So you're like, your eyes are like this then.
Yeah, my eyes were like this. Also not car related, but also all the apps, right? Everything is digital, completely different world than it was when I saw it last. The first surprise, though, to be all honest, when I took a cab or when I had my transport from the airport to the hotel, I was really surprised how many still legacy brands you see everywhere. Right. And not that many EVs. And if there was an EV, it was a Tesla or it was one of the local brands. But there was also not the new, like hard to see a Neo, an Xpeng, a Seeker, really few. I was always like, where are they? Where are they? I want to see them. So on the road, and that probably is also Shanghai specific. But on the road, I was actually surprised that the picture is still very, very like legacy driven. But when I got to the show, I was amazed I was amazed how little interest there is in the legacy brands. And
Oh my goodness.
like no interest. My wife works at BMW. I went to the BMW booth. I went up the stairs and I took a picture. Empty BMW stand, and across BYD, a big line, and people couldn't get in. I was like, this is exactly how it felt like, right? You saw all the Chinese brands, amazing designs, amazing interior, like not what I saw 10 years before, where it was copycats and cheap and, quality was not there. And you suddenly were like, okay, this is gone. They are on eyesight, right? They have this stuff together, and there's huge interest. Everybody wanted to look at the Chinese brands, and especially the new ones.
And the buzz and the energy, right?
Yeah.
The buzz and the energy, right?
Amazing.
I echo that sentiment because I'm a huge fan, and it's a terrible EV, but I'm a huge fan of the e-tron RS, the coupe.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful car. It's a terrible EV, but it's a beautiful car. Went over to Audi, no one standing in front of me, got to go sit in it right away. Go over to Zeekr, where the X is, and there's a 10-minute wait for a $30,000 car,
Yeah.
or $25,000 car. And I was just, it was just kind of a moment where I'm like, yeah, this is a turning point for legacy auto in China for sure. So.
Yeah.
With respect to the Germany market in particular, I think the German brands are still well ahead of everyone, right? Even when it comes to EVs.
Yeah, I think that you also see, if you look at the numbers, the EV registration numbers, Volkswagen is, I think they overtook Tesla again because of just recently, but they are absolutely ahead. And I think it has to do with the fact that, they're a known brand. They have always had a huge market share. People gonna buy a Volkswagen even if the software is not amazing, because again, Germans are not that crazy about the software and in-car entertainment. It's the younger generation that will change that, but the current new car buyers are 50 years plus. So they're absolutely fine with that. That, by the way, too, that was one thing that absolutely impressed me, the Chinese manufacturers when I was in Shanghai, like those screens, that entertainment. Well, I'm a techie, I'm a freak, I love this. But I know putting my parents or my mother-in-law in that, they'll be like, oh my God, and a camera looking at me. No way, I don't want to have a camera. Put a sticker on it so they don't see me. So I think that is something where they won't win with that in Germany. And that is where German's going to buy German as long as there's good alternative. And Volkswagen has a good range. It's the ID3, the ID4, the ID5. We don't need an ID7. That's a car for China, in my opinion. That's also the segments. They do a good job on the segments, but also BMW has a good range. Mercedes now comes to a good range. But then again, for me, the missing piece is the volume segments. You go into small SUVs, you go into compact cars, you go into small cars. You have some good options from the Stellantis brands, but they're expensive. They're expensive. You're not ready to pay 30K plus for a small car like that. You want to get that for 15. And that's why I say once the grants run out, they're going to have a problem because you're not competitive. And I think that's a segment where we really miss more alternatives. I think in the premium space, 100%, that's why I also fully understand why the German Audi, BMW, Mercedes move up into luxury, because they say that's where we can survive. That's where we have an amazing product, but we cannot compete on the 1 Series X1 and those, the electric. Let's leave that market, right? So I fully get that.
Right.
But that's where the volume is, especially when you talk retail.
Are you saying that a model like the ID2 All, what's the name? ID2 for All or something?
Yeah, the ID2 was here.
All? Is it?
But it's not here.
Right. It's not here. And it's going to be below 25,000 euros.
That's it. Yeah, because at the moment, that's a segment that is missing, right? And that's also...
But that's going to be a loss leader for Volkswagen, though, because that's not profitable for them. It can't be. It cannot be profitable for them. But they need to play defense and defend share.
Yep.
And that's the crazy thing, because I agree with you. The United States is in the same situation. There's the Hummer EV. There's the Ford F-150 Lightning at 67, Rivian, Lucid at 67, 80,000 US dollars. But the average price for a vehicle in July was 48,000 US dollars. So in order to get the take rates to 10, 15, 20, 30%, like in China, we're going to need to see pricing below $48,000 across a ton of products. So that's the challenge, because in China, and you saw this from the Shanghai Auto Show, there are brands that you've never heard of. But in Europe and the United States, there's only a handful of startups that really have gained any traction.
Yeah.
And most of them are having troubles manufacturing the vehicles. So And this is why it's, and you guys agree or disagree, for the time being, it's Tesla's world and BYD's world for the most part. But
I mean, go back to Tesla. How many Model S's and Model X's are they selling? Which is the premium part, right? Very, very few. It is really where their success and their volumes come from is Model 3 and Model Y, where you have cars, like 40K and I think as well, they, like the price cuts are now moving below that. But that is exactly where you need that more. And ideally, you need a car that is at the, like the 30K level in order to really get into volume.
So what have you been hearing about from your, let's say, network about the Volkswagen Xpeng investment? Are they surprised? Are they worried? Because I look at it this way: there's been 2, potentially 3 transactions from Volkswagen Group just within the last few weeks. Audi and SAIC on the EV platform, and then Volkswagen with 5% ownership of Xpeng for $700 million. And then the third one is the Jetta Leap Motor rumor. This tells me that Volkswagen Group is a lot more desperate than they made out to be earlier. But is there shock, surprise, awe that it happened in Germany?
I think there was, I think media and general public was really surprised. They were caught on surprise because they're like, oh my God, now, like the last 20 years, it was the other way around. Pretty much Chinese companies invested in Europe, and now suddenly European companies invest into Chinese companies to help them. So I think it's a true turning point, and that is where the surprise came. If you ask me and people in the industry, I think the surprise is not that big because you look at the numbers, you look at the failure in China and how they have really lost share and how they're so dependent on China, as you mentioned before too. Like Volkswagen, all the German brands are so dependent on the China success, or have all the growth over the last decade or so has come from that. And what do they do if that is not continuing? And so I'm not surprised that that is a defensive move. They have to do it. And I think we'll see more of that, to be honest, because otherwise, how do they want to solve it if they don't have a solution that is the only way they can? But it is a true turning point, in my opinion.
And it's opening the floodgate for more of these to happen.
Yeah.
Probably within this year, 1 or 2 more. I wanted to get this same question that we asked James, I don't know whether you guys touched upon this. Your suggestions, your recommendations, your advice. I mean, talk is cheap, right? The China EV Inc., they've talked the talk. BYD, they're in 54 markets. Do we need to be more patient? What is it? What are your recommendations?
Let me stop you right there, Lei, because we need to qualify this. Vehicles purchase is still an emotional buy. So there's hours and hours of research, a lot of it on CarWow, right? And so it's not like a brand can come in the automotive sector and automatically be hot. Tesla, the instant hit was 20 years in the making. Okay. So I think there's outsized expectations, but they, instead of making a bunch of mistakes, Philip, you tell, because I know there's people from BYD, NIO, and Xpeng that listen and watch this stuff. So this is your opportunity to tell them point blank what they need to do to take on the German market. So
I mean, just to add, when I test drove the Atto 3 in Paris, I thought this is a perfect vehicle for Europe. Maneuverability, I don't know about the pricing, but
I think absolutely. Thanks for that question as well. I think before I go into the recommendation, one very important thing you said, Lei, just in your question already, do they need more patience? Yes, they need more patience. I think that is, as Tu also said, you're building a brand, you're building a market, you're building trust, it takes time. I think you cannot expect going into a market and boom, it sells. So Tesla didn't do that. And Tesla had a crazy guy that, didn't even have to spend on marketing because he had Twitter doing that for him. But I think anyways, anything takes time. And I can tell you from carwow as well, it took time to get Germans used to use that way of buying a car. It is not an instant success. Nothing is an instant success, especially if it's your biggest or second biggest investment in your life, buying a car. So patience is one thing. But let's go back to what is the advice, what you need to get right. And I think there's pretty much, I think 3 or 4 things. The first one is you need the right product, the right segment. You're right, Lei, the Atto 3 absolutely hits it. But a lot of the others come, the huge SUVs, big sedans, which are not for the German market. Germans want small SUVs. They want compact cars. We have small cities, small roads, so they want smaller cars. They don't want the Li Auto SUV style, right? That is for America or China, but that won't fit in, like drive the car through, Italy. You can't even fit through the street on your vacation. So you need to have the right product. And I was shocked when I was in Shanghai talking to not only the brands that are already coming, but the ones that are considering. They all think big cars. They all think premium. Stop that. Go in the segment that is hot, the segment where you can compete. And that for me is the compact and the smaller car segment or the SUV segment. And the second point is pricing. You gotta enter, and that is what customers tell us. As a Chinese brand, they expect better value for money, just like the Koreans entered 20 years ago. It is value for money. It's a good price. And they haven't done that. The ones that came positioned themselves premium first because they thought they can try to compete on the level, the Volkswagen and the German brands, which I believe they can, and customers tell us they cannot. So that is pretty much, you need the right product, you need the right pricing. And then the third thing, when we ask customers what holds them back from buying, is exactly that. I don't know the brand. I don't trust the brand. What do I do if it breaks down in 3 years and they leave the market again? So the entire network, how they build up their sales and after sales, but also how they market their vehicles. The majority of them came with very small or no marketing budgets and thought, we do it like Tesla, right? We don't spend anything on marketing. They won't sell, because people need to get used to those brands. They need to hear the brands. They need to see them on the road. They need to build that trust over time. That's where the patience comes in. But they need to be ready to spend. And they need to be ready to be visible on carwow. They need to be ready to be visible on other platforms, and more visible than anyone else, because nobody has ever heard about BYD. Nobody has ever heard about NIO or all those brands. NIO does a good job on PR. They're very, very loud at the moment. But I haven't heard much about Aura, Way. They've been around for 2-3 years. You don't see anything. You don't hear anything. iWay, same thing. And they're very quiet. They don't have marketing budgets. But no, you need to do the opposite. You need to be super loud. You need to be overly there. You need to get in front of the eyes. When people research their next car, they need to be made aware that there is an alternative from China that is actually better technology or same level of technology, better price, and immediately available. That's how MG did it. They spent a lot of marketing last year while nobody could deliver cars, and they got in front of them and said, our cars are immediately available, they're good value for money, and you can have them today. Or you can wait for your ID3 a year and a half to get it. And that's how they got in. And I think these are the elements they need to get right and really be fast as well adapting, because otherwise it will just take really, really long.
MG hits on all those factors that you just talked about.
They're the only brand at the moment selling.
Right. And the heritage, that helps. So.
And I think this is kind of that bridge, because carwow is really the only major digital portal for these Chinese brands who are pretty much only digital marketing in China.
Yep.
So bricks and mortar marketing, promotion, sponsorships, and print is really foreign to them, generally speaking. And spending money on those types of things where it's a little bit harder to measure effectiveness that's the art of marketing. And I completely agree. And when they come to the United States, not everybody's going to be on the internet using their phone to buy things. And so they need to have billboards. The best marketing is obviously having more cars on the road.
Yeah.
Right. But yeah, so the three of us should do a side hustle consulting company, and then they should hire us to launch into Germany.
I got an interesting call from Zeekr representative, cold call you. I don't know how they got my information. I'm like, I don't live in China. And then he's like, where are you? Well, I'm in China, but in the US. And it's like, oh, we're already in Europe. Hopefully we'll go to the US soon. So that was funny.
Philip, we're going to wrap this up in a few minutes, and then we're going to give you a chance to ask us any questions. But let's do this. Let's end it on a bang. What are going to be Tesla's long-term prospects? The Model Y is one of the best-selling electric vehicles in Germany right now. Why does it resonate? And what is going to be the reaction when Tesla has the largest factory in Germany?
I mean, the Model Y hits exactly all those things I said before. It is the right segment. It's a smallish SUV or mid-sized SUV. The price is incredibly competitive, and they just...
Can you tell us what the price is? Because it changes so much that it's hard.
I actually have to check the Tesla Y price.
See,
what
you
it
need
is
to check
today.
too.
I need to check it as well.
It's like a stock price, right? It goes up and down, up and down, up and down.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
No, but at the moment, list price starts at 47,000 euros. So you take the 6,500 euros grants off, it's 40K for a, like mid-sized SUV, leading technology. Still, Tesla is seen as, you get an EV, Tesla is, like the most experienced Western brand you can get an EV from. And I think what they really did well is a charging network. They take that peace of mind. Oh, range is not a problem because wherever on the German highway you have a fast charging network and you can always charge. And the reason I ended up buying a Tesla, because I was like, everything, the entire concept makes sense. And by the way, it's actually also really affordable. It's not expensive. And I think that's what they got really right with the Model Y. They hit that. The plant is a really interesting one. Every German would have told you they will never, ever build that plant that quickly as they built the plant without having the permit to build it. And this is like typical Silicon Valley. I built it, and if something goes wrong, I build it back. Like no German company or manufacturer would have ever done that. They would have gone 3-4 years through like all the process of getting approvals before they even put the first brick there. Tesla was done by the time they got the permit. And by the way, if something would have been wrong, none of the government officials would have not given them the permit because they already employed how many people? So I think they were very smart, moving really fast. Again, the German competitors totally underestimated that. And I think, it's smart from them to do it in Germany because, again, that gives a German trust. They actually have a plant in Germany. They employ people here. So I'm not afraid of buying a foreign brand. It's actually part of Germany now. It was a smart move.
Are most of the Model Ys produced
in Berlin
now being produced at Gigabyte?
Yeah.
Okay.
So when you buy a Model Y in Germany, you normally get it from Berlin.
Do you have a German made or do you have a China made?
I have a Shanghai made.
Nice. Okay.
All right.
So you got standard range?
I got the performance, the 3 performance. That's still built in Shanghai. Or that was last year, was still built in Shanghai.
How's the fit and finish? Are you pretty satisfied, pretty happy?
No. I mean, I'm happy with the finish. I'm not happy as a German driving 200 kilometers an hour on the highway. It's damn loud. And I think this is okay. Again, competing in Germany is very difficult. It's the only country in the world where people go 200 on the highway and where people are very picky about interior. And that's where I think Tesla was never great on interior. I still prefer driving a BMW because I have a much nicer interior that it feels better.
Sound deadener.
It is quiet when I put my cruise control on 210 when I'm on the highway on the BMW. I wouldn't do that on a Tesla. It stops at 150, the cruise control. But you also you don't drive faster because it is getting loud and the EVs, they use too much battery and then you need half an hour charging. So you don't do it. If an ICE, you do it because you refuel in 5 minutes. Overall, I'm happy with the car, but yeah, the finish and like the noise and stuff. I know this car is not built for the German market.
Yeah, I think one advice I would add is,
I hope Elon doesn't call me now.
No, I was saying that one more advice to stress is that Europe is not a one-size-fits-all market. Right? You talked about Germany.
No, not at all.
Autobahns, other countries in Europe. That's the other thing that these Chinese EV Inc. needs to really seriously think about. That's why it takes time.
100%. It's also segments. You look at Germany and the UK, there are 2 extremely premium markets. Like we have a lot of premium cars. You don't have that in France, Spain, Italy, the other big European markets. They are small car markets. You really need to be good in the A or B segment. And there's way more volume there. And the average RRP is so much lower in those markets because the premium market is smaller. So it is, as you said, Lei, every market is different. And you need to really consider which market you go into the which product.
Yeah, France, I think Dacia Spring is like number 2 selling EV in France, made in China, right? So
the Spanish brand made in China, selling in France.
Yeah.
So, but to your point, guys, I would have never thought, okay, the Model Y is super loud because I'm not thinking of driving it normally at 200 kilometers an hour. So that's very appropriate because now you need a different set of tires, you need more sound deadener, and in some cars, I'm certain in certain Chinese EV cars that are on the Autobahn at about 150, 170 kilometers an hour, the front end starts shaking or something like that. So these are the things that they really need to consider from a quality standpoint for the individual markets. Because what always gets me upset is that Westerners say Europe and Westerners say Southeast Asia like it's just one big country. And it is, especially in Southeast Asia, because there's 95 million people in Vietnam, there's 97 million people in Philippines, 450 million in Indonesia. And so these are individual countries, and you need to treat them that way.
Yeah.
And so, maybe the China EV Inc., some of them are pretty naive about that as well. So
we need to drive a Neo on the Autobahn and see, gets it to 200 kilometers per hour and see what happens.
I can, I did. It's fine. It's good.
It's
really?
Fine. Good.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's good.
And by the way, the Model Y is better as well. The other day I drove a Model Y, it was much, much better. So I think it also depends. It could be that, because it was a China-produced car, I don't know. But you consider that only for Germany. It's only Germany has that odd thing where people might drive that fast. Not all the time, but you do it once in a while and you just realize, oh, this is not made for that, right? It doesn't feel good.
The other thing too is the gigacasting, the one piece, single piece front and rear end. That's going to be a game changer. Tesla's so China EV Inc. and Tesla are pushing prices down because they're making things cheaper. And this is going to be because the UAW is negotiating with the big three in the United States. I know that Germany has a very, very strong union. And so it's just going to be really difficult to reduce costs on like an institutional level in order to compete. But hey, Philip, I think we should start wrapping it up. It's been awesome talking to you, but I wanted to open this up. If there's anything you wanted to talk about CarWow, or if you have any questions for Lei and I, please let us know.
I actually do have some questions. Let's though keep it short to one or two.
Okay.
The one question we talked about patience, Lei. You mentioned that before. I keep wondering, what do you think about the European plans of the Chinese players? How much patience do they have, right? Or I already hear lots of rumors. You have brands like delaying their plans, others pulling them forward. There's a lot of change. And there is always this like, oh, and two of them, by the way, suddenly cancel their participation to IAA. And you're like, oh, what's happening? So what is your view on how much patience do they have with their European plans? Or do they pull out quickly if it doesn't work?
Well, I think about Neo, and if we hear from what William often says, and he stresses that we're building the brand, right? And they are building the brand. I think they're probably the best at doing that right now. For a company like BYD, then you start talk about producing locally, things like that, right? But if you look at the volumes, or the tactics, which actually one question I wanted to ask you was BYD's tactics with Sixt. It's a 100,000 vehicle deal, right? And that's a way to get your brand or your models out there. Lincoln Co. subscription model, right? So I think we're seeing multiple tactics being deployed to drive kind of the branding. But how much patience? I don't know. I mean, BYD seems to be the most aggressive when it comes to European market, right? They're almost every market, right? And like I said, they have the products, every single segment. Model 3 is great. I think that's what they're pushing.
On the EV and the PHEV side.
Yeah. So, but we haven't seen the volume. So, I mean, what are we expecting? Are we expecting, like thousands, tens of thousands? We're not there yet. So I think they need to be more patient.
Well, the bottom line is that there's China speed, and then there's Europe speed and United States speed. So they're not built for patience, number one. But the price war is going to wash a bunch of them out that had ambitions to go to Europe. And the second thing is that the ones that do survive, it's still going to be really competitive in China. And the pressure release valve and to get some of that capacity sold rather than have it to continue to discount in China is to ship it to Europe. And so there's going to be, what you're going to see is a lot of dipping the toes of some of these Chinese EV companies that most of our listeners have never heard of, but you've now seen because you were at the Shanghai Auto Show. But I still think there's probably going to be 4 or 5 brands that are going to resonate, a NIO, a BYD. And He Xiaopeng last week said, we're going to enter 24 markets next year. So they're going to get super aggressive as well. And, unless the German and the European legacies can get down to these price points and even just lose money, but lose less money, then I think the bottom of the market is going to be owned by a lot of Chinese EV brands.
Thank you.
Anything else?
My last question. What's your take on the VW Leapmotor rumors?
I'll let you start, Lei.
I don't know where to start because, like we said on the last episode, Volkswagen is the deepest into the rabbit hole as far as using either China partner technology platforms or using these smart EV startups.
Let me stop you 1 second, because this is what we should let the audience know. So Mercedes, 37% of their sales, China. BMW, 33% of their sales, China. Audi, 40% of their sales, China. So they are completely over-reliant on one market, and it's not Germany. But please go ahead, Lei.
No, right? The Volkswagen is all in. When I say all in, meaning they're willing to try these new and unheard of tactics.
Finally.
Yeah, to be more localized. You describe it as a tough pill to swallow. They're willing to swallow that tough pill in order to be relevant. So
in order to try to be relevant.
Yes.
Because are they shifting engineering, technical, and R&D challenges for now organizational behavior and cultural challenges? Because it's not just Leapmotor. They're working with SAIC. They're potentially working with Leap. They're going to work with XPeng. They're working with Horizon. They're working with Thundersoft. So there's 5, 6, 7 Chinese companies that Volkswagen Group needs to work well with. Yes, work well with in order for them to even put a product on the road in China that can be competitive. We're not even talking superior. We're talking competitive. Okay. And I can't end the chat with you, Philip, as someone who's a German that's very technology forward. How do the German legacies bridge this gap? Because if you believe, like I believe, in 5, 6, 7 years, it's really going to be software driving a lot of the features. They can't catch up to Tesla. I don't think they can catch up to China EV Inc. So, where does it go? Like, how does this turn out for them?
That is the question, right?
Because if they could do the Volkswagen thing, and they could potentially hollow themselves out and become a contract manufacturer if they partner their way to relevancy. So yeah, it's an interesting issue. If you're a German technology company that's really good at software development and hardware software integration, you have a huge opportunity ahead of you. Huge opportunity.
So for any foreign companies, automakers, to even be, let's say, not successful, to try to be relevant in China, you have to go through this path where you have to have a path that's China specific, and you have a outside China path for other markets if you want to be relevant, or you leave. I think that's it.
I think I agree. I think looking back to what we discussed earlier, Auto Shanghai, right, on what I said about in-car entertainment and all that, and you're in the China ecosystem is so different as well. And if you want to crack that, you have to have a different way, as you say, because it especially through the digital ecosystem, they diverge so much. The West and like China is so different. And if you want to get that right, you have to localize. You have to be there and have a different route for that versus what's going to happen in the West, because that's where Europe and the US are so much closer in terms of the digital ecosystem, the behaviors, the culture. That's just so different how people use cars.
Well, not the same rule, but on the flip side, for the Chinese EV and going to Europe, going to Germany, what works in China is not going to work in Germany.
100%.
It's not going to work in Europe.
So China EV Inc., contact Philip if you're planning to enter Germany or Europe. So, hey, Philip, real great talking to you. It was good to catch up since last time we talked in Shanghai, and we both look forward to seeing you in Munich. Thanks for being on the show. And yeah, I'm eating my popcorn just like you. And you and James, I think, were smart enough to find this podcast early, and I hope it still helps you with what's going on over there. So thanks again.
Thank you so much for having me.
Hi, this is your co-host Lei Xing. Philipp says he's not your typical German, and listening to him talk about his professional journey at CarWow and perspectives on both the German legacy automakers and China EV Inc. definitely make you a believer that he is not. Philipp gave us great insights into the car buying habits and processes in Germany, and his recommendation or advice on China EV Inc. entering Germany or the larger European continent can best be summarized with the 4 Ps: patience, price, product, and promotion. Balance these with the right amount of China speed, perhaps is the secret sauce for success. We look forward to catching up with Philipp at IAA Mobility 2023 in Munich and share a few beers together. Prost!
Lei and I will be sharing more of our conversations with the men and women around the world, moving the EV, AV, and mobility sectors forward as part of this China EVs and More Max series. Some folks will be instantly recognizable, but some will just be people that are doing amazing things in the space that we think deserve to be highlighted. Don't worry though, Lei and I will continue to host our live weekly China EVs and More Twitter Spaces room that summarizes that week's most important news coming out of the China EV, AV, and mobility space. For those that can't catch the live show, you can find the China EVs and More pod on all major platforms or wherever you normally get your podcasts. As EV adoption reaches its global tipping point, it'll be even more important to stay updated on everything that's happening here. Lei and I are confident that China EVs and More is the best resource to do that. Until next time, as always, thanks for listening.